Welcome to It Takes a Viking, the official podcast of the Salem State University Alumni Association. My name is Mike Mitchell, Assistant Director of Alumni Relations at Salem State, and I'm pleased to welcome you to Veterans Appreciation Week, highlighting Salem State alumni veterans and their tremendous contributions to our nation, both at home and abroad. Today, it's my honor to welcome General Don Bolduc of the class of 1988 and 2015 recipient of the Dr. Marilyn Flaherty Distinguished Alumnus Award. After completing his degree at Salem State in 1988, General Bolduc went on to earn a master's degree from the United States Army War College. He began his military service prior to his time in Salem State in 1981 and completed his tenure in 2017. In between those years, he maintained a number of critical posts throughout the world, including Commander of Special Operations Command Africa and Deputy Director of U.S. Africa Command. In addition to his many notable achievements, he also served 10 tours in Afghanistan. Throughout his tenure in the United States Army, he earned the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart. At this time, it's my honor to welcome General Don Bolduc to the podcast. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
We certainly appreciate all your many contributions to our nation, both at home and abroad. We're looking forward to talking with you today to learn more about kind of your sterling career, your amazing work that you've been doing with veterans since your retirement from the service, and getting to know a little bit more about your Salem State experience. So the first question we always like to ask folks is what brought you to Salem State? How did you end up studying and working here?
Well, I was looking for a small college in order to, not be lost in the shuffle and lost in the numbers. And back in 1984, I had gone to Dean Junior College, right? And so I got an associate's in criminal justice. So I was interested in police work, but I was also interested in teaching. And I was looking for an ROTC program as well that I could fit into. And I wanted a small program, a small school. And as I was looking, Salem State College came up. It was affordable, but the Massachusetts National Guard picked up the tab for that. So it became even more affordable. And it was in a great location in New England, very historic place, not too far from my home state, New Hampshire, and my hometown, Laconia, New Hampshire. I said, why not? And you know what else I like about Salem State? It's a blue collar school. It's a roll up your sleeves, hard working people go there to get a degree to continue to improve themselves. And that's one of the things that I really love about Salem State. It was a previous teachers college, as you know, if you follow the history of the school. My wife's grandmother graduated from there and became a teacher. And so I guess one of the best reasons was it was, I guess, a little bit of providence, right? Because I met my wife, who I've been married to for almost 33 years now, at Salem State College. So.
Excellent. And so you began your military service in 1981, graduated from the university in 88. Can you talk a little bit about kind of those next 30 or so years, and in addition to, what we just kind of mentioned briefly at the top of the program and some of the roles that you played throughout your service to the nation?
Sure. So Salem State College's ROTC program at the time was connected to the Liberty Battalion at Northeastern University. We were a satellite company, right, inside the larger Northeastern program. And so, I joined the ROTC program with the intent of going either in the National Guard or going into the reserves, and either following a law enforcement or a teaching career as a, for the rest of my life. But what ended up happening was I started, I did really well in ROTC, and I became the #1 graduate in the Northeastern program by 1988, and was offered a regular Army commission. So I took it. And as things worked out and as the economy struggled in the late 80s and early 90s, I said, well, probably the best place for me to stay for stability with my family is continued to, this military career. I liked what I was doing. I enjoyed it. I went into the special operations career field, so special forces. Most people know the Army Special Forces as the Green Berets, and they connect it to the John Wayne movie in 1968, the Green Berets, and so on and so forth. So it's where I served, and that's what I did. And as I continued to go through the ranks, I started to get promoted. I started to get command assignments, and one thing led to another. And honestly, I thought I would make it to lieutenant colonel and retire. But I ended up making general officer. And so I ended up staying till 2017, where my wife and I decided it was time to retire, go back home. We had aging family members, and it would be nice to spend some time with them and get back up into the New England area in the Northeast. And so we settled in Stratham. But little did we know that 9/11 would happen and that I would end up nearly 20 years of war, serving at all levels of command, over 10 tours in Afghanistan, and losing 74 service members during that time frame, which I reflect on, every single day, and it's my why and my motivation to keep going forward and to keep doing as much public service as I possibly can. So, I've had a blessed life where kind of God has opened up doors for me, closed some doors for me, kind of guided me in the right way. And I seem to, with the help of people around me, make the right decisions, even after I make a mistake and, just keep moving forward. So that's kind of how it worked out.
And I know that for the last several years, you've been a tremendous advocate for service members, whether it's through, the service animal program that you work with. I know you've been an advocate for traumatic brain injury. Can you talk a little bit about some of that work that you've been doing and if there was any kind of one thing that led to being the impetus for that?
Sure. I think the impetus for it was recognizing my own struggles with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, pain management, and all those things collectively that, what a lot of people don't understand is that when you go to war, you're automatically changed. It doesn't matter. And the more you go back to the environment, the more cumulative those effects are. And after 10 tours, nearly 6 years in combat in Afghanistan and in Africa. Africa is a combat zone, right? So commanding special operation forces as a general officer in Africa was no less dangerous, fighting violent extremist organizations there with our partners, our African partners, than it was in Afghanistan, to tell you the truth. So a lot of Americans don't realize that. But in order to protect Europe, in order to protect the Middle East, in order to protect America's interests, you have special operation forces in Africa teaching our partners how to do it, but most importantly, advising, assisting, and supporting them. So it brings us in combat zones in areas that we don't declare that we're at war. So this is an interesting concept that's come up as a result of 9/11. But with that comes mental injuries, physical injuries, and spiritual injuries, right? That triangle, that triad. And the more time you spend, the more post-traumatic stress you have, the more compounded it gets. And if you have a traumatic brain injury to go along with it, or you have physical injuries, depending on what they are, and they can be from minor to catastrophic. And the more you see in that environment, and the more your brain reorders itself so you can stay alive more than one day in combat, we owe it to our service members to help them with their mental injuries, as well as their physical injuries and their spiritual welfare, right? Whatever that is, however you define that third one, right? And so a lot of the spiritual stuff is hurt by the immorality that you see in war, the devastation that you see in war, the terrible things that people do to each other in war, right? And so that's hard sometimes. Survivor's guilt is hard when you are in a firefight and your buddy gets killed and you're right next to him and you don't, right? You suffer an injury from that. And when you come back to your home and you're not taught how to deal with that, then you develop triggers. And sooner or later, you're going to be triggered. And if we don't give our service members the care that they need, with their mental injuries, then they're going to seek ways to self-medicate themselves. And then you run into drug and alcohol issues. And then you run into behavioral issues. And then you run into domestic issues. And then it just continues to accumulate. And if you don't take care of it while they're service members, it expands and it gets even worse when they become veterans, because really the best care you're going to get for that, or the best opportunity for care, is when you're on active duty. It gets even more difficult when you become a veteran. And that carryover can be very, very dangerous. And that's why we see the high suicide rates, both on active duty and among our veterans. So recognizing in myself that I needed help, right? And I was still on active duty. I was just promoted to a general officer. My wife drew the line with me. My wife's a nurse, and she studied this for many years throughout, since 9/11. And she was very smart about this stuff, and I was not. And I lived in a military that wasn't accepting of it until about 2010, but only to develop programs, not really to develop the care that our service members needed. And to this day, they're not there yet. So as a general, I was able to go for care. And this is something I'm not proud of, because I kept it under the radar and nobody knew about it because I was afraid for my career and so on and so forth. And after about 2 years of, going for therapy and having my post-traumatic stress identified and going for therapy for that, and my traumatic brain injury identified, and my pain management issues taken care of, my sleep disorder taken care of, all these things, I was a better version of myself in both my personal and professional life. And of course, people could see it, right? It was identifiable. And then I had this epiphany that I was a coward, hiding under the radar. And so I developed, in conjunction with my subordinate commanders, when I took over my division level command, Special Operations Command Africa, we developed a program to help our service members and their families. And it focused on that triangle that I talked about: mental injury, physical injury, and spiritual health. We created an opportunity for trained social workers to come into the unit, occupy office space to bring the family and the service member together. We made time for our service members to get assessed and put into proper treatment programs without any detriment to our mission. And we proved that. And I, as the leader, said, I'm going to protect you, right? No one's going to do anything to you. I'm going to make sure that you stay on your team, stay in your job, keep your clearance, unless there's something extraordinarily medical that, we have to make a decision. But you'll be in that decision loop. That's something that we're not going to decide. We'll talk and decide it collectively. And that was, of the thousands of people that got looked at inside the command, we only had one of those. And that was a sergeant major who ended up with, we discovered a brain tumor on his brain. It's about a little smaller than an eraser. And so he had to go to Walter Reed and get that operated on. But hadn't we had that program and he never got that looked at, it might have been fatal, because he never would have discovered it. So, and what I was doing was against DOD policy, by the way, because DOD policy is, guy identifies, a soldier, service member identifies themselves with post-traumatic stress, they're out of their job, they're put on a program, they're non-deployable. Well, that just destroys them, because now you're compounding the problem. You're taking them out of the very thing that they love to do for absolutely no reason, because they are very high functioning with the even with post-traumatic stress. It's not a mental illness that debilitates you to the point where you can't do your job. And I'd like to use myself as an example. I'm a very high functioning person. I use myself as an example all the time, because leaders fix this problem for their soldiers and their service members, right? And unless you're willing to put skin in the game, they're not going to follow to get that help. And so what that did was resulted in a New York Times article on the program. I got a call from my chain of command saying, hey, this is going to bode well for your career. And I said, well, I'm not doing it for my career. I'm doing it for the service members. We have an obligation, and we're not giving them the help that they need, the help that they deserve, help that their family deserves. And this program does it without cutting into the mission. So I don't know why you're so upset about it. But nonetheless, do what you're going to do to me. But I'm going to continue to do this program and continue to help service members. And we left it at that. And so I carried that mantra, that idea, over into the civilian world when I became a veteran. And we have been doing that not only here in New Hampshire, but across New England and across the country. My wife and I, she brings in the family aspects of it. I bring in the service member aspects of it. We go out and we talk at conferences. We do whatever it is we need to do. We volunteer on many, many boards, and we don't take a dime, right? I will not take any money for this, because I don't think it's right. And I think all the money that is earned to help veterans should go to veterans, right? And not to pay the overhead costs for board members and CEOs and all this other stuff as you set up your structure. So this is a passion for me. I am someone who still gets treatment today for post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, sleep disorder. I've taken care of my pain management issues. I was blown up once, so I've had both my hips replaced. I was in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan, and I've had 3 discs in my neck replaced. Been wounded twice in combat. So, I'm lucky. I still have both arms, both legs, both eyes. But some of the most horrific injuries from war are the ones you can't see. And we're not doing a very good job as a society in dealing with the realities of war when we ask our sons and daughters to go. So that was a long answer, but there's only one way to answer it, and that is completely and long. So I apologize if it was too long, but you got to set the stage, right? And I got to walk the dog with you from 2013 to today, right? So.
No, and I think now as we talk about, you have obviously the benefit of hindsight in your favor now, and on the back end of 3 decades of service to the nation, and what you just described might be the answer to the question I'm about to ask. But as you think back to your time, maybe what would you identify as one of your greatest accomplishments or successes, and then perhaps one of the greatest challenges or failures that you've had to overcome from your time in service?
Right.
Or throughout, in addition to.
Obviously, this is, I think, the greatest accomplishment, right? And it's not my accomplishment; it's the accomplishment of the service members who decided to go and say, "Hey, listen, if we're going to be the best we can possibly be, if we're going to be the best we can in our personal lives and in our professional lives, and we're going to do what we say we're going to do, and that is, to serve, you have to be the best version of yourself, right?" And so being a facilitator of that, I think, is the greatest accomplishment, and doing it with the moral courage to tell the 4-star generals and the 3-star generals that, there is a better way to do it. And this may not be the perfect way, but right now it's the best way we got. And then sticking to it and not backing down, because when people call you up and tell you that your career is going to end, right? You say to yourself, whoa, wait a minute here. Some people, what am I doing? This was the right thing to do. And you know what? That moral courage is something that has, it allowed me to take on even more challenges, like, speaking up against the poor policy in Afghanistan and strategy in Afghanistan that didn't warrant the body bags and hospital beds that we were putting people in when they changed strategy in 2014, right? And doing the same thing in Africa when the administration wasn't doing the right things policy-wise and strategy-wise, and speaking up against that, and I was told on both occasions, that's not going to bode well for your career. So I kind of use that as a litmus test. If somebody gives me a call and tells me it's not going to be good for my career, then it's probably the right thing to do. And so that's what I did. And, those 3 things, one leading into the other, building that moral courage to say, hey, this isn't right. And it's incumbent for us to stand up for that, because there are lives on the line. And I firmly believe that if something is important, it's got to be worth losing something to you in order to make it happen, right? And mistakes and failures, I really don't sign up for the idea of failure, right? I think that you make mistakes, and if you allow that mistake to run your life, then you will fail. But if you take those mistakes in stride and you build on them to become a better person and more productive, then you're not going to fail, right? I mean, I think failure is a fate that you give yourself. I think people use it, I think, in kind of the wrong context, right? I use Abraham Lincoln as an example all the time. He didn't fail because he never quit, right? He didn't get elected 3 times, and then he finally gets elected, and then he finally becomes president of the United States. And, he just didn't quit, right? And if you don't quit and you work hard, then you elude failure, and you just got to accept setbacks, right? I think that's it, right? I'm a religious person. I believe that God gives you opportunities, and if you take those opportunities, there's also going to be points in time where you make decisions, right? And sometimes you're going to make the right decision, and sometimes you're going to make the wrong decision, but you got to be able to accept both and move forward. And depending on which one it happens to be, get yourself on the right track or stay on the right track, So I apologize. My dog is seeing somebody walk by, and she is barking at them. My wife is closing the door now.
So looking at it from the other perspective, with the benefit of hindsight now, having been away from school life for a little while, if you could go back and remember your time at Salem State, is there anything that stands out to you as a memorable experience? What would you tell your college self? With what you know now, would you change anything that you did back then?
I don't want to change anything, because if I changed anything, then I wouldn't have met my wife, who I've been married to for almost 33 years, and we have 3 beautiful children and 3 beautiful grandchildren. So changing things, no. But you know what? If I'm looking back at myself, and I have the, hey, pay attention to time. Time is really important. Don't waste it, and pay attention to relationships. relationships are very, very, very important in your lifetime for a couple reasons. One, you can't get through life without help, and you need people in your life, to help you. And likewise, you need to help other people. And I think that one's even more important, right? And then the balance, right? Balance, right? Whatever it is you do in your life, whether it's, recreational, whether it's study, whether it's work, family, whatever it is, try and, get some balance in your life. So I think those three things of, really pay attention to time, because it will go by fast and it'll slip away from you like that. And use that time to take advantage of every opportunity. Don't hand wring, roll up your sleeves and get to work. And then leverage those relationships to better yourself and to help others, and to know how important they are and to appreciate them. And then the balance, right? The idea that everything in your life requires some sort of balance, and that if you do too much of one thing, then you're going to disadvantage yourself on the other side, right? So just do that. And I think if I had done that in some cases, it would, I would have made better decisions, right? So.
Great. And kind of our signature question before we let you go today. You talked a lot about the values that you appreciated about the university from your time as a student here, but what is it from the macro level, that 30,000 foot view? What does it mean to be a Salem State Viking and Salem State graduate?
That's a great question, right? But the opportunity to get an education, right, is hugely important, and that's what Salem State offered me, right? They offered me an opportunity to come to school, to learn, to grow in an environment where I met all different types of people. And I would say in 1988, that 80s period, that was a pretty difficult time for our country, right? But my experience at Salem State was we all appreciated each other's opinions, right? I could sit in a sociology class or an anthropology class or a history class. We could talk about the big problems without hating each other, without hating each other for our opinions, right? And I think one of the big things that Salem State instilled in me was, one, the importance of education. Two, the importance of the importance of accepting other people's opinions about things and using that to grow. And then I like Salem State's, at least what I learned from Salem State was that, this is just the beginning, a stepping stone for improvement, to become a better person and to contribute into society, and to seek other opportunities for education and other opportunities for growth. I had some very good professors that I enjoyed my time with. I was a student teacher in the biology department, which I really enjoyed. And hey, developing your college schedule and being able to interject your work schedule as well was awesome, right? So I could spend pretty much all day at school doing two things: one, going to class, and two, working and earning money. And that was kind of my way of giving back, right, to freshmen and sophomores who were struggling in biology, right? Not an easy course, but for whatever reason, I did well in it. And so, work ethic, keeping an open mind, being accepting of other people's ideas, using that inside inside a system to make life better for others, right? And I think I took that with me, and I'm appreciative of that. And I was honored when they recognized, the achievement with the Alumni Award, right? What an honor that was, unexpected, and kind of justified in my mind that, this is a full circle, right? You go to this school, you learn, you take the values that you learn from the school, you put it inside the larger society, and then the school comes back and recognizes that. And I was quite honored for that.
And I think obviously anyone who's had the opportunity to listen to our talk today would certainly agree that it was beyond deserved. So thank you on behalf of our entire alumni population for your many, many years of service to the nation, for your continued work with veterans that you continue to do to this day. If you ever should make the trip down from New Hampshire to the area, we'd love to have you on campus. And it probably looks pretty similar from when you were here 5 or 6 years ago for alumni weekend, but obviously from that time to when you graduated, it looks pretty different, I'm sure.
Well, when I got the award, I walked around the campus and I was like, wow, a lot of things have changed, right? But the old school that I went to, was still there. It's still identified and personified in the legacy of the school, right, in the history of the school. But I am glad to see that Salem State is a growing, now a university from a college. I mean, when you look back at its history, you see that it continues to grow and continues to become important, and it allows working people to get a degree and move forward and become better in their lives, and that's hugely important, because I think that's what it's all about, making the human condition better and achieving and allowing people to achieve their goals and their successes for them and their families. That's what it's about. So,
and we have this new kind of ideology that we're working within here that says no place so close can take you so far.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in many ways you are a shining example of that. So, again, thank you, beyond measure for your many years of service. Thank you for what you continue to do. This has been a great opportunity to talk with you. Again, if you find yourself in the area, I hope you'll reach out. And thank you for joining us today.
I definitely will. Thank you. And thank you for doing this. Thank you for recognizing our veterans and their families. They deserve and they've earned everything. And, we should be ensuring that they get that, and venues like this illuminate that and remind people. And so I think it's great. So thank you very much. My hat's off to Salem State University, to the administration, to yourself. Thank you very, very much. And God bless all the Vikings out there.
And thank you, General Bolduc. This was a special Veterans Appreciation Week edition of It Takes a Viking, the official podcast of the Salem State University Alumni Association. Later this week, we'll welcome Secretary for Veterans Affairs, Cheryl Poppy, a graduate with an MBA from 2001 here at Salem State. Check out the links in the posting for our conversation today for more great resources available to our student veterans while they're here on campus, and to learn more about our Veterans Affairs office. Thank you all for watching today, and we'll see you next time.